What if a simple act of kindness, an ordinary gesture you thought no one noticed, was actually a test of fate? For Samuel Rodriguez, a 32-year-old single father drowning in debt and faded dreams, kindness was all he had left to give. The recipient was Theodore Lancaster, a quiet, grumpy old man who shuffled into Sam's small coffee shop every morning like a ghost, always sitting at the same familiar corner table. Day after day, Sam greeted him with a warm smile, a hot cup of coffee, and a few precious minutes of conversation, expecting nothing in return. He simply thought it was the simplest way to make the world a little easier to breathe, even if only for a few minutes on a gray morning. He had no idea that the lonely man sitting there was hiding a secret worth billions of dollars. A secret that was about to blow his entire life apart. Because on a stormy Tuesday morning, the coffee shop door didn't open for Theodore anymore. Instead, it opened for his team of lawyers, accompanied by 4 bodyguards in black suits, faces cold as stone. And they came for Sam. This is a true story about a man who once lost everything, but never lost his kindness. And about a lonely billionaire who found family in the last place he ever expected. If you believe a small act can change an entire life, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. So every week, I can share with you another story that reminds us how ordinary moments can restore faith in humanity. And now, what do you think will happen when that single father's name appears in the will of a stranger billionaire? Let's begin. The bell on the door of Beacon Street Cafe was the soundtrack of Samuel Rodriguez's life. Not a cheerful bell, but a weary, metallic chime announcing yet another customer in need of coffee, another plate to clear away, and a small, persistent hope that maybe, just maybe, the tip jar would be a little fuller today. The cafe itself was a relic, a time capsule stuck between decades gone by, with faded mustard-colored vinyl booths, linoleum floors that clung to your shoes, and the scent of burnt coffee mingled with bacon grease seeping into every crack of the wall. For Sam, or Samuel, as people still called him back in culinary school, Beacon Street Cafe was both a prison and a refuge. For the past 3 years, 6 days a week, from 5:30 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, he performed the familiar dance of a waiter, gliding through narrow aisles with instinctive grace, balancing plates on his arm, pouring coffee without spilling a drop, and smiling so often that sometimes he forgot whether it was real. But his true passion, his soul, was locked away in a small apartment a few blocks down the street, buried under dust and unpaid bills. A dream of a restaurant bearing his name, where flavor was a language and food was a memory of childhood. That dream had become a luxury now, buried beneath piles of expenses, debt, and sleepless nights spent raising his child alone. To understand how Sam ended up in this life, we have to turn the clock back a little. Sam was born into a working-class immigrant family. His father, Miguel Rodriguez, was an electrician from Puerto Rico. His mother, Claire O'Connor, was an Irish-American nurse. They met at a hospital in Queens, between night shifts and a rainstorm, fell in love, and had Sam, their only child. He grew up between 2 worlds, hearing both Spanish and English, the smells of sofrito and soda bread blending in their tiny kitchen. His parents worked tirelessly to give their son a better life, and for a while it seemed that dream was within reach. Sam went to culinary school. He had a natural gift for flavor, a sense of combining ingredients that caught the attention of head chefs. The future stretched wide open before him. Then Jessica Martinez walked into his life. They fell in love and married too young. When Jessica became pregnant, Sam believed he had everything: a career, a family, happiness. But life, as always, had other plans. His father, Miguel, died in a work accident when Sam was 25. 2 years later, his mother, Claire, lost her battle with cancer. And then, after their son Luke was born, Jessica realized she didn't want this life anymore. She didn't want the sleepless nights, the cramped apartment, or the financial weight of raising a child. One morning, when Luke was 2, Sam woke up to find a note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. I need a different life. You're a good father. Luke will be fine with you. Jessica." And just like that, Sam became a single father. He had to quit his job at the upscale restaurant. The hours were unpredictable. He needed something stable, a shift that would let him pick up his son from school every day. That's when he found Beacon Street Cafe. Morning shift, 5:30 to 2. It meant he could pick up Luke at 3 and spend the afternoon with him. It also meant waking up at 4:15 every morning, living with chronic exhaustion, and shelving his dream of owning a restaurant. But Sam never complained, because every evening, when he opened the door and Luke came running, shouting, "Dad!" and wrapping his tiny arms around him as if the world contained only the two of them, every bit of fatigue melted away. Luke, 6 years old, curly black hair, wide brown eyes, was his everything. The boy was the reason Sam woke up every morning, the smile on his face through endless tired days. But life was still hard. Very hard. Rent for their small Alphabet City apartment, $1,800 a month. After-school childcare, $800. Luke's asthma medication, $120, not fully covered by insurance. Sam's total income from the cafe, including tips, $2,400. Do the math. 2,400 minus 2,720. He was short $320 every month, not counting food, clothes, or transportation. Sam was sinking, and he knew it. He owed $8,200 on his credit cards. The landlord had sent 3 warning notices for late rent. He lived on the razor's edge between getting by and homeless. But Sam never let Luke see the worry. Every morning, he woke at 4:15, careful not to wake his son. He made breakfast, left it on the table with a small note. "Dad loves you, remember your inhaler." Dad, Mrs. Jamie, the kind neighbor, came by at 7 to take Luke to school, and Sam took the subway in the dark, usually dozing 20 minutes on the cold plastic seat before stepping into the cafe at 5:28 a.m. Tony Delgado, the 62-year-old owner with a grease-stained apron, would glare at him. "You're 2 minutes late, Sam." "Sorry, the train was delayed." Denise Murphy, the veteran waitress of 54, would shake her head. "That single dad's always slow." Bet the kid was sick again last night, Sam heard it, but never answered. He just tied his apron, brewed the coffee, and started another day like every other. The regulars were like recurring characters in a play. Frank, the construction foreman, always left exactly $1 as a tip, no matter the bill. The 2 secretaries from the nearby law office spent every morning gossiping about their boss's love life. And then there was Theodore. He wasn't just a regular. He was part of the cafe, like the flickering neon sign outside. Every morning at exactly 7:15, he pushed open the heavy glass door and shuffled slowly to the corner table by the window. He never looked at anyone. Always wore the same outfit: a faded tweed jacket, worn slacks, cracked leather shoes. His face was a map of wrinkles, his pale blue eyes clouded and distant, staring through things without really seeing them. He was a whisper in a noisy room. The first day he came in, Tony warned Sam, "Don't bother with the old man in the corner." He doesn't talk to anyone. Just give him black coffee and the special. He'll pay exact change and leave." Denise scoffed. "Waste of a four-top table. Should make him sit at the counter." But Sam saw something different. In that lonely, weathered figure, he recognized something familiar, a dignified kind of solitude that stirred the artist still living quietly inside him. So he ignored their advice. On that first day, he set a menu down in front of the man. "Good morning, sir. I'm Sam. Can I start you off with a coffee?" The old man just grunted without looking up. Sam poured the coffee anyway. The next day, he did the same, and the next. For a week straight, the man responded to every greeting with silence. But Sam persisted. "The toast looks extra good today." Or, "Cold out there. This coffee should warm you right up." Then one Monday morning, about a month later, when Sam brought the food over, he noticed the man struggling to cut his toast with a dull diner knife. His knuckles were swollen from arthritis. Without hesitation, Sam took the knife gently from his hand. "Let me help you with that," he said softly. He cut the toast into 4 small squares, bite-sized. For the first time, Theodore looked up. His cloudy blue eyes met Sam's, and for a fleeting second, Sam saw a spark. Maybe surprise, maybe gratitude. The man gave a small nod, then lowered his head again. That was a victory. From that day forward, they had a quiet ritual. Sam brought black coffee, the special of the day, and always cut the toast. Sometimes he shared small stories, a funny customer, or a dream of a restaurant that blended the flavors of his father's Puerto Rico and his mother's Ireland. The man never replied, but Sam could feel him listening. Sometimes Theodore left an extra quarter on the table, a silent acknowledgement that, to Sam, meant more than a $20 bill. His co-workers teased him endlessly. "Still flirting with your corner boyfriend, Sam?" Denise smirked. "Leave the old man alone," Tony grumbled. "As long as he doesn't complain, it's fine." Sam didn't care. Those 10 minutes each morning had become an anchor in his chaotic life. In a world that demanded too much and gave too little, that fragile connection felt pure. He wasn't doing it for tips or thanks. He did it because when he saw that lonely man at the corner table, he knew everyone deserves a bit of warmth, even if they never ask for it. He had no idea that his small act of kindness was being observed, recorded, and judged by a mind sharper than anyone in that cafe could imagine. Weeks passed, and the quiet ritual continued. Every morning at exactly 7:15, the door opened, and Theodore walked in. And every morning, Sam was ready. Piping hot black coffee, the daily breakfast special, and his steady hands cutting the toast into 4 perfect squares. But then, something began to change. By the 6th week, as Sam refilled his cup, Theodore spoke. His voice was hoarse, faint, as if it hadn't been used in years. "You have a child?" Sam froze. It was the first time the old man had spoken to him beyond a nod of thanks. "Yes," Sam smiled, his face lighting up. "A son, 6 years old. His name's Luke." Theodore nodded slowly. "Why are you working so early?" "Who watches him?" Sam told him. "About waking up at 4:15. About preparing breakfast the night before. About the kind neighbor who got Luke ready and took him to school." Theodore listened, his pale blue eyes unblinking. "That's hard," he finally said. Sam shrugged. "It's okay. I'm his dad. I do what I have to do." Theodore looked at him for a long time, a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled slightly. "You're a good father." Those 4 words made Sam fight back tears for the rest of his shift. Because no one had ever said that to him. Not Jessica. Not Tony. No one. But this old man, a stranger, saw him. truly saw him. From that day on, Theodore began to ask about Luke. What grade is he in? What does he like? Do you read to him? And Sam answered, his face brightening every time he mentioned his son. Luke loves to draw. Dragons and superheroes. I keep every picture. He wants to be a chef like his dad. I tell him he can be anything he wants. Theodore listened, and sometimes, very rarely, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. One Saturday morning in the 8th week, everything changed. Sam got a call from Mrs. Jamie, the neighbor. Sam, I'm so sorry. I can't watch Luke today. My daughter's sick. Sam's heart sank. He had to work. He couldn't miss his shift. Tony had already warned him more than once. With no other choice, he brought Luke to the cafe. Daddy has to work, buddy, he said as they rode the subway. You'll sit quietly and do your homework, okay? Luke, wearing his Spider-Man backpack, nodded eagerly. Yes, Dad, I'll be good. As soon as they walked in, Tony looked up from behind the counter, frowning. Sam, why's your kid here? I'm sorry, Tony. The sitter canceled last minute. I had no choice. He'll sit quietly in the corner, I promise. Tony sighed. Fine. Just don't lose customers. Sam led Luke to a small table near the kitchen where the boy could see him. Sit here and color, okay? I'll check on you often. Luke opened his coloring book and box of crayons, tongue poking out as he concentrated on a page of Spider-Man. Sam started his shift, his eyes constantly flicking toward his son. At exactly 7:15, the door opened. Theodore walked in, but this time, as he passed, he stopped. He looked at Luke, the little boy sitting alone, bent over his drawing. Sam noticed and hurried over. I'm sorry, sir, he said quietly, embarrassed. I had to bring my son today. The sitter canceled. He won't cause any trouble. Theodore looked at Luke, then back at Sam. That's your son? Yes, sir. His name's Luke. He's 6. Theodore stayed silent for a long moment. Then he said something Sam didn't expect. Let him sit with me. Sam froze. But you! Theodore's eyes met his. For the first time, emotion flickered clearly within those pale blue irises. Pain, longing, loneliness. I'd like to get to know him. May I? Sam nodded, almost not believing what he'd heard. He led Luke to the corner table. Luke, this is Mr. Lancaster. Say hello. Buddy Luke looked up, his big brown eyes wide. Hi, sir. I'm Luke. Theodore slowly sat down, studying the boy with an expression Sam couldn't quite read. What are you drawing? Luke grinned proudly and held out the paper. I drew my dad. He's my superhero. The drawing was as clumsy as any 6-year-old's. A stick figure holding a tray of food, with messy words scrawled above. My dad, my hero. Theodore held the paper, his hand trembling. Sam noticed something strange. A tear sliding down the old man's cheek. You're very lucky, Theodore said softly, his voice shaking, to have a father like that. Luke nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. He's the best dad in the world. A few steps away, Sam wiped at his eyes. He had to get back to work, but he couldn't tear his gaze away from the scene. The next 2 hours were something close to a miracle. Theodore, the silent man Sam had known for 8 weeks, came alive. He asked Luke about school, friends, and what he wanted to be when he grew up. I want to be a chef like Dad, Luke said proudly. Dad says I can cook anything if I try hard. Theodore smiled, truly smiled, for the first time Sam had ever seen. Your dad's right. Do you know how to count? Yes, I can add and subtract. Let me teach you a bit of math then. If your dad agrees. Sam, pouring coffee at another table, looked up and nodded. Of course, sir. For the next 2 hours, Sam watched an entirely different Theodore Lancaster. He patiently explained equations to Luke. He laughed when the boy grasped a tricky one. He praised him when he got an answer right. He was no longer a lonely old man. He was a grandfather. Around 10 a.m., Luke started to yawn. Normally, he'd be at his Saturday class by 9, so now he was tired. He rested his head on the table and drifted off to sleep. Quietly, Theodore took off his tweed jacket and draped it over the boy's shoulders. Sam came to check on them, emotion flooding his chest. "Thank you, sir," he whispered. "You don't have to—" Theodore looked up, his eyes glassy. "No. Thank you, Sam. You gave me an invaluable gift today." "What gift?" "The chance to be a grandfather again, even just for a few hours." Then he said something that made Sam retreat to the back room to cry. "I once had a son. And a grandson. They're both gone now. But today, it felt like they were still here." By noon, Theodore was preparing to leave, much later than his usual 8:30 departure. Luke had woken up, full of energy. "Mr. Lancaster, will you come back next week?" "You promised to teach me chess." Theodore knelt down, taking the boy's small hand in his. "I promise, my dear boy. I promise." As he left the cafe, Sam and Luke stood by the window, watching him go. "Dad," Luke said, "he's really nice." Sam hugged his son tightly. "Yes, buddy. He really is." Sam had no idea that would be the last time he ever saw Theodore alive. Monday began like any other day. Sam woke at 4:15 a.m. He prepared breakfast for Luke, wrote a small note, and stuck it on the fridge, kissed his son's forehead, then stepped outside, slipping into the freezing night on the way to the subway. He arrived at the cafe at 5:28. Tony grumbled that he was 2 minutes late. Denise shot him a displeased glance, and the shift began like always. By 7 o'clock, Sam was getting ready for the regular. He brewed black coffee, checked the breakfast special, eggs, bacon, whole wheat toast. Then, out of habit, he cut the toast into 4 perfect squares. He set everything on the corner table where the man always sat, and waited. 7:15. The door still didn't open. Sam looked at the clock. Maybe his train was delayed. It had happened before. 7:30. Still no Theodore. A thread of worry began to coil in his gut. "Tony," he called, "do you know the address or phone number of the old man at the corner table?" Tony looked up from the griddle. "No." "Why?" "He hasn't come. He's never late." Denise let out a sharp little laugh. "With money like his, he's probably vacationing in Florida." But Sam didn't laugh. A strange unease was blooming inside him. 7:45. 8 o'clock. 8:30. No Theodore. Sam poured the wrong coffee, forgot to run a ticket to the kitchen. Tony snapped, "Sam, focus!" "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry." By 9 o'clock, Sam decided, if there was still no sign, he'd find a way to contact him. Ask the regulars, or someone who might know. And then the bell rang. But the sound was different from every other day. The entire cafe fell silent. Even the sizzle from the griddle seemed to freeze. 4 men walked in, tall, in black suits, moving with the crisp purpose of a movie scene. Tiny earpieces in their ears, their motions precise enough to chill the room. 2 planted themselves at the door. The other 2 stepped aside, making way for a 5th man. He was in his late 50s, silver hair slicked back, a face sharp as a blade and eyes cold, intelligent. A charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, probably worth more than Sam's 5 years of salary. A glossy leather briefcase in his hand. He scanned the room, somewhere between mild disdain and a fixed objective. Tony tried to regain his composure, wiping his hands on his greasy apron. Can I help you, gentlemen? The man in charcoal didn't answer. His gaze swept once and stopped on Sam, who stood frozen beside the espresso machine, coffee pot hovering mid-air in his hand. He approached, each step heavy and exact. His Italian shoes ticked a steady rhythm across the linoleum floor. Two bodyguards followed a few paces behind, bringing with them a pressure that seemed to squeeze the oxygen from the room. "Are you Samuel Rodriguez?" His voice was low, calm, carrying an authority that made people want to nod. Sam's heart battered his ribs. He nodded, throat dry. What was happening? Was he in trouble? The rent? The credit cards? Or was something wrong with Luke? The man stopped in front of him, studying him for a long beat. "I'm Philip Anderson, a senior partner at Peterson and Associates. I'm Mr. Theodore Lancaster's personal attorney." The name hung in the air. Theodore Lancaster. It took Sam a few seconds to make the connection. The old man from the corner table. "Theodore," Sam whispered. "Is he okay?" "He didn't come in this morning. I was a little worried." Mr. Anderson's face softened. "Barely. Mr. Lancaster passed away peacefully in his sleep late Sunday night." Sam's whole world tilted. The coffee pot in his hand suddenly weighed too much to hold. A wave of grief rose up, sudden, fierce. It made no sense. He hardly knew the man. But that quiet routine, that black coffee, that morning nod, they had become part of his life. A small anchor in a chaotic world. And now, it was gone. The image of him smiling at Luke, the look in his eyes when he said, "You're very lucky," and the promise to teach chess, all of it flashed back like a film reel snapping. "Oh, God," Sam murmured. I'm so sorry to hear that." The first tear fell before he could wipe it away. Brenda at the bar gaped. Frank folded his newspaper. The whole cafe watched, following a scene no one understood. Mr. Anderson gave a slight nod, voice even. Mr. Lancaster was a very meticulous man, with very specific instructions. In his last will and final instructions, there is a provision requiring your immediate presence. If you're able, please make arrangements. A car is waiting outside to take us to the office." "A will?" Sam blinked. "I think there's been a mistake. I just served him coffee." "There's no mistake, Mr. Rodriguez," Anderson said, firm but not unkind. "You are the person who cut his toast into 4 squares every morning, for the past 18 months, without ever needing to be asked." That detail stunned Sam. He had noticed. Not just noticed. He had told his attorney. "Sal," Sam turned to Tony, who stood rigid behind the counter. I don't know what this is." Tony only said quietly, "Go, Sam. Just go." Denise will cover Denise shot him a look. A flicker of envy in her eyes, but no words. Sam untied his apron and set it on the counter. He grabbed his old bag from the back and stepped out. 4 bodyguards and the attorney closed ranks around him, forming a strange circle, between a tiny coffee shop and a faraway world of privilege. Both staff and customers stared, as if watching someone get pulled into a story that didn't belong to them. Outside, the air was cold and damp. A sleek black Lincoln Continental waited at the curb, engine purring softly. A bodyguard opened the door. As Sam sank into the supple leather seat, the most luxurious thing he'd ever touched, he glanced back at Beacon Street Cafe, where it had all begun. It looked small and sad beneath the gray sky. A cold intuition threaded through him. He would never look at it the same way again. The morning ritual was over, and something new, complicated, profound, and impossible to predict, had just begun. The trip to the law office was a silent, surreal passage across the city. Sam stared out through the dark-tinted window. familiar streets suddenly felt distant, separated from him by a thin veil of mist. Inside the car was a quiet oasis steeped in the smell of leather and polish. Mr. Anderson sat opposite, flipping through documents in his leather briefcase. His face was a professional mask, unreadable. In Sam's head spun a vortex of confusion and a dull grief for the old man he had hardly truly known. Peterson and Associates occupied the top floor of a glittering skyscraper in the financial district. A world far from Beacon Street Cafe, marble floors, soaring glass walls with a panoramic view of the city, hushed corridors lined with art. Sam, in faded jeans and worn sneakers, felt like a stray cat that had wandered into a palace. He was led into a large conference room where a long, glossy walnut table dominated the space. At one end of the table sat two people who looked out of place here, though for different reasons. They radiated the aura of offended privilege and impatience. The man, late 20s, hair slicked back, a designer suit a bit too tight, eyes etched with irritation. The woman beside him, likely his mother, dressed flawlessly, her face a mask of polite disdain, 10 fingers tapping impatiently on the tabletop. Mr. Anderson cleared his throat as they entered. Ms. Natalie Lancaster, Mr. Justin Lancaster. This is Mr. Samuel Rodriguez. Justin's gaze slid over Sam with open contempt, his lip curling. This is who we've been waiting for. A waiter? Grandpa must have been senile. Justin, please, the mother chided, though there was no heat in her voice. Her look toward Sam was just as cold. Mr. Rodriguez, please have a seat. Anderson indicated the chair at the opposite head of the table, set apart from the Lancasters. The distance was intentional, a chasm between two worlds. Sam sat down, fingers interlaced tightly in his lap. The bodyguards stood motionless against the far wall. The air was so taut it could be cut with a knife. Now that all parties to the principal will are present, we'll begin, Anderson announced, opening a thick leather-bound file. He put on reading glasses and began in an even, dry tone. Most of it was legal terminology that washed over Sam. Trusts, endowments for charities he'd never heard of, bequests to funds he couldn't picture. The numbers were so enormous they became abstractions, no longer money. Clearly, the Lancaster estate was a mountain. Then Anderson paused, looking directly at Natalie and Justin. To my daughter-in-law, Natalie Lancaster, and to my grandson, Justin Lancaster, I bequeath the contents of the Lancaster Family Trust, as previously arranged. The principal amount equivalent to $5 million to each, Justin snorted loudly. $5 million? That's it? An insult. The company's worth billions. Your grandfather liquidated most of his personal holdings over the past 2 years, Anderson replied coolly. He had full rights over his assets. He owed no one anything. He owes us, Natalie snapped, the polite mask cracking. We are his family. Anderson ignored the outburst and read on. All remaining personal effects, real property, and control of Lancaster Enterprises shall be handled as follows. He drew a deep breath. Sam held his, still not knowing why he was here. To my friend and physician, Dr. Howard Chen, I leave $2 million. He turned a page. Sam's eyes widened. And now, Anderson looked up over the rim of his glasses straight at Sam, his voice carrying in the hushed room, we come to the final clause. He read, To Mr. Samuel Rodriguez, the young man at Beacon Street Cafe, who extended kindness to an old man when there was no reason to, who treated him with dignity when others saw only a nuisance, and who never forgot to cut his toast because he noticed the old man's hands trembled. Sam's vision blurred with tears. He had noticed all of it. Anderson continued, his voice seeming to soften. To Mr. Rodriguez, I leave a legacy of kindness repaid. First, a gift of $500,000 to be transferred immediately to his account, to ease burdens as he once eased mine. Sam's mouth fell open. The room tilted. $500,000. More than any number he'd ever held in his life. Enough to clear every debt, to provide for Luke for years. A miracle. What? Justin shot to his feet, roaring. The old man's given $500,000 to some busboy? We'll sue. He wasn't of sound mind. Sit down, Mr. Lancaster, Anderson said, voice like ice. I'm not finished. Justin glared, then sank back into his chair, face flushed with rage. Anderson adjusted his glasses and read the final line. And finally, because it was the last place on earth I felt seen, not as a source of money, but as a human being, I bequeath to Mr. Samuel Rodriguez the entirety of the assets and business known as Beacon Street Cafe at 428 East 14th Street, which I purchased 6 months ago through a subsidiary. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the conference room. Sam stared. The cafe? He had bought the cafe for himself. Justin laughed, not a pleasant laugh, but a cold, vicious, incredulous bark. The cafe. He left him a grease trap. Perfect. After all those pretty words, he locked the busboy in his own cage. Grandpa had a twisted sense of humor, but Anderson did not laugh. He closed the will, removed his glasses, and looked at Sam with an expression hard to name. Part sympathy, part respect, and part warning. There is one more thing, Mr. Rodriguez. The cafe comes with a small investment portfolio Mr. Lancaster attached to the business to secure long-term operations and renovation. That portfolio is currently valued at approximately $6 million. Justin's laughter died. The color drained from his face, from red to chalk white. Natalie's carefully manicured hand flew to cover her mouth. Sam felt the ground drop away beneath him. $6 million. The cafe. Not a cage. A kingdom. The taciturn old man he served every morning, the man he had once pitied, wasn't just wealthy. He was Theodore Lancaster, founder of Lancaster Enterprises, a mogul hiding in plain sight. And he had just handed a one-time culinary school dropout, turned waiter, the keys to a new life. A life that, judging by the sparks flaring in Justin Lancaster's eyes, might become very, very dangerous. Leaving the law office was like stepping out of a decompression chamber into a storm. Bodyguards escorted Sam to the Lincoln Continental, shielding him from Justin's frothing stream of insults as he followed them into the hallway. "This isn't over, you piece of trash! My lawyers will tear this apart. You won't see a cent." Sam didn't answer. He was still in shock, his mind replaying two phrases on a loop. $6 million. The cafe is his. Anderson handed over a business card and a thick folder. "A financial advisor will call you tomorrow, Mr. Rodriguez. Do not speak to anyone, especially members of the Lancaster family. If they contact you, call me immediately." Mr. Lancaster anticipated their reaction. "Inside the folder there's an envelope, a private letter to you. Read it when you have a quiet moment." The car dropped him in front of the shabby building where he lived. The contrast numbed him. 1 minute walnut wood and billion-dollar figures. The next, a dusty, creaking staircase leading up to a small apartment. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Canvases leaned against the wall. An empty easel stood, a silent reminder of a life on hold. The first thing he did was call Luke's after-school program. Voice trembling, he spoke with the finance manager, paid off the entire balance due, prepaid 2 years, and requested the best program for Luke, including the art classes he'd never been able to afford. Relief hit him like a wave, so strong it drove him to his knees. He sank to the floor and wept, not from sadness, but from the sudden release, crushing a burden he had carried for too long. The next morning, Sam didn't go to the cafe. He couldn't. What would he even say? How would he walk in there? Instead, he went to the bank with the $500,000 trust check Anderson had prepared. The bank manager, who had always been politely cool, suddenly beamed and led him to a private office with a conspicuous deference. The world around him had begun to change. By afternoon, he knew he couldn't hide forever. He had to face it. He took a deep breath and walked the familiar streets back to Beacon Street Cafe. During the lunch rush, through the glass, he saw Denise bustling, Tony sweating over the griddle. He pushed open the door. The bell chimed, heads turned, conversations died. Tony looked up, spatula in hand. Denise froze mid-step with a tray of sandwiches. They had all heard. The rumor from Frank, who'd witnessed the morning before, must have spread everywhere. "Sam," Tony said, his voice uncertain, "I heard you came into some money." Sam stepped up to the counter. He looked from Tony to Denise, to the kitchen staff peeking out, the people who had once been his whole world. "It's true," Sam said, his voice steady in a way that surprised him. "Mr. Lancaster left me some money, and he left me the cafe." A murmur rippled through the staff. Tony's spatula clanged onto the griddle. "Left you what?" "I've owned this place for 30 years. Sam's heart sank. This was the part Anderson had warned him about. He opened the folder and pulled out a document. "According to this, Tony, you sold the cafe 6 months ago to Lancaster Holdings. Since then, you've been a salaried manager." Tony went still. His face went ash-gray. "Lancaster Holdings. They paid me a fortune, more than this place was worth. I figured some developer would tear it down. I had no idea." He slumped onto a stool, as if the ground had given way. "So I've been working for the old man all this time. And now, I work for you." The absurdity hit everyone at once. Sam Rodriguez, the quiet server whose hours had been cut, was now their boss. Denise barked out a bitter, scraping laugh. "Fairy tale stuff, huh? So what now, boss? Fire everyone and hire your friends?" The test hung in the air. The first trial. Every eye fixed on Sam. He could feel the anger, the suspicion, the fear. The old life was gone. He was no longer one of them. He was the owner, the other. Sam drew a breath, setting aside his shock and fear. He thought of Theodore, of the man's quiet dignity. What would he want? "No one's getting fired." His voice was clear and firm, even to his own surprise. "Nothing changes right now. Tony, you're the best short-order cook in the city. Denise, you can run 6 tables without breaking a sweat. This place works because of all of you. I don't know much about running a business. I'm going to need your help." That sincerity vented the pressure in the room. Tony looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Denise still frowned, unconvinced. "So, what's your big plan? Champagne with caviar?" "No," Sam said with a small smile. "The first since yesterday. But I'm buying a new espresso machine, a knife grinder, and we're fixing that air conditioner." It was exactly the right thing to say. A couple of cooks in the back laughed. Those were the daily gripes. Small, stubborn miseries. Having the new owner, once their co-worker, acknowledge them meant more than they expected. At that moment, the bell chimed again. A mail carrier stood in the doorway. "Package for Sam Rodriguez." Sam signed, opened it, puzzled. Inside was a slim, elegant box stamped Peterson and Associates. Resting on velvet lay an antique brass key and a handwritten letter on thick cream paper. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. From Theodore. Sam opened the letter, hands trembling. My dear Sam, if you're reading this, the world has learned my secret, and you have received my gift. The money is for your freedom. The cafe is for your heart. This key is for your future. It opens my private office. Philip knows where. Go there. Understand why. One last request from an old man. Please go. Theodore P.S. There's a small gift for Luke in my desk drawer. Wait until his birthday. A key. A secret office. Sam looked up from the letter, his head spinning. This legacy wasn't just money and a building. It was a mystery. And as he took in the uncertain faces of the staff and remembered Justin Lancaster's venomous threats, Sam understood. He would have to solve it if he truly wanted to claim his new life. The address Mr. Anderson gave Sam was on Fifth Avenue, one of those pre-war limestone buildings with a canopied entrance and a doorman who looked like a retired general. As the taxi pulled to the curb, a fresh wave of unease rose in him. He wore the nicest outfit he owned, a plain black shirt bought at a thrift store, and still felt like an imposter. Mr. Anderson was waiting in the lobby, solemn. He hasn't let anyone into his private apartment in over 10 years, he said, as the two of them stood in a wood-paneled elevator gliding quietly to the top floor. Not even family. He handled all business at headquarters. This was his refuge. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. Sam stepped out and forgot to breathe. The space was vast, walls of glass from floor to ceiling looking straight out over Central Park. But it wasn't the view or the luxury that overwhelmed him. It was the art. Paintings covered the walls. Over the fireplace hung a Monet, water lilies shimmering in the afternoon light. A Degas, a dancer sculpture, stood on a plinth. On the adjoining wall was a small Van Gogh self-portrait, its gaze blazing through him. A private museum with flawless taste. He was one of the most discreet art collectors in the world, Anderson murmured, watching Sam's reaction. This is what Justin really wants. This collection, it's priceless. The apartment was perfect to the point of coldness, and loneliness seeped into every corner. No family photos, no trace of everyday clutter, just priceless art and elegant, sterile furnishings, like a gilded cage. The study is this way. Anderson led Sam down a long hallway. He stopped at a heavy oak door. He gave me a sealed envelope with the key, instructing me to open it only after his death to grant you access. I'll wait out here. Sam's hand trembled slightly as he fit the antique brass key Theodore had left him into the lock. The mechanism turned with a satisfying click. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The study was nothing like the rest of the apartment. Warm, lived in. Books crammed every shelf, from classical literature to modern physics. By the fireplace sat a large, worn leather armchair. The air carried the faint scent of old paper and extinguished pipe tobacco. But what dominated the room was the wall behind the desk. Not a painting, a corkboard, stretching from floor to ceiling, overlaid with a complex web of photographs, stock charts, legal documents, handwritten notes, all connected with colored string. The strategic map of a general commanding a global empire. This was the true Theodore Lancaster. At the very center of that web was something out of tune, a small, slightly blurred photograph. Sam stepped closer. It showed a woman laughing, seated on a checkered picnic blanket in a park. She was lovely, kind eyes, a warm smile. Beside it, another photo. The same woman, standing proudly in front of a small, charming shop. The sign read, Maggie's Table, where everyone is family. Sam's eyes were drawn to yellowed newspaper clippings. The headlines told a tragic story. Promising restaurateur Margaret Lancaster killed in car accident. Corporate shark Harrison Vance snaps up bankrupt restaurant chain. Lancaster Enterprises announces hostile takeover of Vance Industries. Everything clicked into place. Margaret must have been his wife, someone who opened simple places where people could sit and eat together. She was gone, and a corporate predator named Vance seemed to have profited, only to be crushed years later by Theodore's retaliation. Sam glanced at another section of the board, the part devoted to Justin. Photos of Justin on yachts, in nightclubs, with a string of models. Financial reports showing massive losses from a tech startup funded with his grandfather's money. Copies of checks Theodore had written to cover his grandson's gambling debts. A note in Theodore's shaky hand. It carries her name, but not her heart. At last, Sam's gaze settled on a small empty patch of board. Pinned there was a recent photo, a distant candid, of Sam himself. He was standing outside Beacon Street Cafe on a break, smiling at something on his phone. Beside it was a handwritten scrap. He has her heart. Tears slid down Sam's cheeks. It had never been about toast. He hadn't been testing Sam's kindness. He'd been searching for a reflection of the wife he lost. Someone with a good heart, who understood that the worth of a place isn't in its price, but in the warmth and dignity it gives. The cafe wasn't just any diner. It reminded him of Margaret's dream. By leaving it to Sam, Theodore wasn't merely giving a gift. He was entrusting Margaret's legacy. A new resolve hardened Sam's grief. Now, it wasn't about money. It was about honoring the faith of a lonely old man who had lost everything that truly mattered. Justin didn't just want money. He wanted to erase the last thing his grandfather had built. The only legacy Theodore believed was worthy. Sam stepped to the desk. On it sat a sealed envelope with his name. He opened it. Inside were a letter and a share certificate. A single share of Lancaster Enterprises. The letter read, "Sam, knowledge is power. This single share gives you the legal right to attend next month's annual shareholders meeting. Justin will be there. He will try to seize control of the board. He thinks you're a nobody. Prove him wrong. Everything you need is in this room. Your friend, Theodore." Sam looked around. The lattice of power, the story of love, loss, and revenge. A complete dossier on the Lancaster Empire and its enemies. Theodore hadn't left just a diner and a fortune. He had left Sam an arsenal. The battle with Justin Lancaster was coming, and Theodore had just armed the most unlikely soldier for the fight of his life. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change for Sam. By day, he learned to run Beacon Street Cafe. With the help of the financial advisor Theodore had arranged, he began to understand profit margins, supply chains, and payroll. The $6 million portfolio wasn't just a staggering figure. It was a finely tuned trust, generating steady income to keep the cafe running, pay the staff, and let him live without fear for the first time in years. The first thing he did was raise everyone's wages, starting with Tony and Denise. Denise, once his sharpest skeptic, still eyed him warily, as if waiting for the mask to slip. The turning point came one sweltering afternoon when the ancient kitchen air conditioner groaned once and died. The temperature soared like a furnace. "That's it! I quit!" Denise threw down her apron. "I'm not working in a sauna." Once, Sam would have begged her to stay. Now he only nodded. "You're right," he said calmly. "This is unacceptable." He picked up the phone. 2 hours later, a crew of technicians arrived, installing a brand-new commercial cooling system. Sam paid for the emergency job without hesitation. The next day, the cafe was cool and comfortable. Denise returned to work, wordless, but when she called him boss for the first time, the word no longer carried sarcasm. Sam had earned real respect, not by speeches, but by action. But at night, he lived in another world. In Theodore's study, alongside the reluctant yet relentless Anderson, Sam became a student of power. He carefully dismantled the complex web on the wall, learning about shell companies, leveraged acquisitions, and proxy battles. He read Theodore's private journals, where the old man poured out thoughts on business, humanity, and the wound that never healed. Margaret. Through those pages, Sam understood Justin better. A reckless heir burning through his grandfather's fortune on empty ventures, feeding on resentment. Then Sam discovered Theodore's final move. In his later years, Theodore had carved the Lancaster Empire into smaller parts, leaner but more vulnerable, and funneled most of his personal wealth into anonymous charities. The result? Justin was starved of resources, unable to buy control outright. Theodore had left his grandson not an empire, but a battlefield. Still, Justin had one advantage: a few board members loyal to his father, who saw him as the rightful heir. Piecing together Theodore's notes, Sam saw the plan. At the upcoming shareholders' meeting, Justin would call for a no-confidence vote against the current CEO, a loyalist to Theodore, then leverage the Lancaster name and allies to seize the chairman's seat. "He can't win outright," Anderson said one night, pointing at the shareholder chart. "But he can create chaos, panic the investors, tank the stock, then force a buyout by another conglomerate where he'll be installed as a puppet. His ego would rather burn the empire than be ignored." Sam stared at the single share certificate on the desk. "So, how do we stop him?" Anderson's reply was quiet, steady. "With the only weapon Theodore gave you, the truth. That share gives you the legal right to enter that room and speak. You can't win with votes, but you can win with hearts and reason." The sleepless nights followed one after another. Sam and Anderson plotted. A daring, improbable plan built on Sam's ability to convince a roomful of sharks that a man who once served coffee understood what was right better than the heir to a dynasty. The day of the meeting arrived. Sam stood before the mirror in Theodore's penthouse bedroom. No more faded t-shirt. Anderson had insisted on hiring a stylist. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, hair slicked neatly back. He looked composed, confident, though inside his heart thrashed like a trapped bird. "You're ready," Anderson said from the doorway, a rare, faint smile crossing his face. Theodore would be proud. 2 security guards escorted Sam to the lobby. As he stepped into Lancaster Tower, the chandeliers blazing overhead, he saw him, Justin, surrounded by allies, laughing loudly, arrogance pouring off him. When he spotted Sam, his grin faltered, then curved into a mocking smile. "Well, look who showed up," Justin said loudly, for everyone to hear. "Here to serve coffee, buddy?" Laughter rippled through the group. Sam didn't answer. He met Justin's gaze, calm and steady. "I'm a shareholder, Justin," he said, his voice clear and firm. "And I have every right to be here." He walked straight past him, head held high. And in that moment, the man once dismissed as the corner table waiter stepped into the lion's den. The battle had begun. The boardroom felt like a theater of corporate power. A massive U-shaped table filled the center, surrounded by men and women in immaculate suits, faces carved from years of wealth and authority. Behind them, tiered rows overflowed with shareholders, analysts, and members of the press. Led by Mr. Anderson, Sam took a seat in the front row reserved for shareholders. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes, curious, skeptical, even mocking. The meeting began with dry financial reports, charts, numbers, graphs sliding by like rain against glass. Sam listened, hands clasped tightly in his lap, his heartbeat quick but his gaze steady. Then the chairperson spoke. "We'll now move to new business." Instantly, Justin rose. He was born to perform, charismatic, confident, voice booming. "Lancaster Enterprises," he began, "is the legacy of my family. My grandfather was a legend, but his time has passed. It's time for a new Lancaster, young, bold, ready to lead this company into the 21st century." He spoke passionately, painting grand visions, tearing down the current leadership as stagnant and uninspired. Then came his final crescendo. "I formally call for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO, and I nominate myself, Justin Lancaster, as the new chairman of the board." A murmur rippled through the room. Several board members nodded, clearly supportive. Justin was in control. The current CEO, George Riley, competent but lacking showmanship, stood to defend himself, but his mild words were shredded by Justin's sharp, rehearsed retorts. "Anyone else wish to speak before we proceed to a vote?" the chairperson asked, scanning the room. Anderson looked at Sam, a subtle nod. Sam stood. A wave of whispers swept through the chamber. "Who is that? What's he doing here?" Justin arched a brow, smirking. "I thought this part was for shareholders, not the help." Sam faced the board, his voice carrying through the microphone, shaky at first, but gaining strength with each word. "I am a shareholder, sir. My name is Samuel Rodriguez." He didn't look at Justin. He looked into the eyes of every person in the room. Mr. Lancaster spoke about legacy. "I'm here today because I, too, am part of Theodore Lancaster's legacy. Not the legacy of billions and takeovers, but the legacy of his final years." Then he told the story of Beacon Street Cafe, of the quiet old man in the corner booth, and of the toast he always cut into squares because he noticed the old man's hands trembled. At first, the room was silent, skeptical. But as he spoke, something shifted. The same executives who had glanced at him dismissively now listened. "You know," Sam said, "in his last years, Theodore Lancaster no longer cared about buying more companies. He cared about people. He spent his mornings in a small cafe, watching them. He wasn't looking for the best CEO. He was looking for the truest heart." He paused, then turned his gaze toward Justin. "Justin Lancaster says he has a bold vision. But according to the documents Theodore Lancaster left, records now in the possession of attorney Philip Anderson, what did that vision bring?" Anderson stepped forward, placing a thick binder on the chairman's desk. "Copies for the entire board," he said coolly. Sam's voice grew stronger. "A vision that led to a loss of $4.2 million on a failed tech project. A vision that forced his grandfather to cover $890,000 in gambling debt. And finally, a vision so reckless that Theodore Lancaster himself wrote in his own hand, 'My grandson has the ambition of a king, but the judgment of a fool. I cannot leave my empire to Justin, not out of malice, but out of duty to protect it from his own hands.'" Gasps swept the room. Justin's face flushed red, trembling with rage. "Lies. All lies." "No," Sam said calmly, eyes steady. "It's all documented." Theodore Lancaster believed the heart of this company was not in its stock price, but in its dignity and conscience, something his grandson never understood. He took a breath, his voice clear, resonant. "I'm not here to seize power. I'm here to honor Theodore Lancaster's final vision." He turned to the board. He didn't want a new king. He wanted a guardian. He trusted George Riley, the man he once called the backbone of this company. But he also knew this company needed a soul. Sam's tone softened, warm and resolute. "So, as a shareholder, I propose an amendment to the company charter, that 10% of annual profits be allocated to establish the Lancaster Legacy Fund, to support small businesses and education scholarships, in line with Mr. Theodore's wish." He paused, then smiled faintly. "And I nominate myself, Samuel Rodriguez, owner of Beacon Street Cafe, the heir Theodore Lancaster chose, to oversee that fund." Silence fell, thick and electric. Then, from the far end of the table, an elderly man, the board's longest-serving member, Theodore's friend of 50 years, lifted his hands and began to clap. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound spread, slowly at first, then rising in waves. Soon the entire room, investors, shareholders, even some who had backed Justin, were on their feet, applauding. No one said another word. Justin stood frozen, his expression shattering. Defeated not by a businessman, but by a waiter with a story that was true. The vote that followed was a formality. Justin's motion was rejected overwhelmingly. Sam's proposal passed unanimously. And in that moment, amid thunderous applause, Samuel Rodriguez understood. The lonely old man had chosen right. 6 months later, Beacon Street Cafe had been transformed. It was brighter now, tidier, and the kitchen looked like a true artist's studio. But the old mustard-colored vinyl chair at the familiar corner table remained, now sealed under a thin layer of clear protective plastic. Above it, a small bronze plaque had been carefully mounted on the wall. "Theodore's Corner, where everyone is seen." Sam now divided his time between running the cafe, with Tony as a well-paid manager and Denise as an improbably loyal shift leader, and overseeing the Lancaster Legacy Fund, which was quietly changing lives. For the first time in years, he had time to paint again. His canvases were now vibrant with color, reflecting the balance he had found between past and present, between art and work, between kindness and power. One Saturday morning, Luke, now 7, sat at the corner table doing homework. Sam passed by, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Dad," Luke looked up from his sketchbook, "do you think Mr. Theodore would like it here now?" Sam sat beside him, gazing at the window where Theodore once sat every morning. "Yes, son," he said softly. "I think he'd love it." Luke bent back over his drawing while Sam opened the worn leather folder Theodore had left him. Inside was an antique ivory chess set and a handwritten note. "Teach Luke to play chess with this set. It's the one I used to play with my son. Now it belongs to Luke. And through him, I hope our true legacy will live on, not in wealth, but in kindness." Theodore Sam placed the chessboard on the table. "Luke, how about I teach you how to play chess?" Luke's eyes lit up. "But Mr. Theodore was supposed to teach me." Sam smiled. "I know, but now he wants me to teach you. And one day, you'll teach your own child." They began arranging the pieces. The faint clicks of wooden chessmen echoed like time looping back on itself. The bell over the door jingled. An elderly man, thin, silver-haired, walking alone, stepped inside. He paused, looking around uncertainly, something lost and sad in his eyes. Sam stood, greeting him with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir. A table for one?" The old man nodded faintly. Sam led him to the corner table, Theodore's table. "This is the best seat in the house," Sam said. "How do you take your coffee?" "Black," the old man murmured. Sam nodded and turned toward the counter. As he did, he caught Luke watching. "Dad," Luke whispered, "he looks sad." Sam bent down, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "Yes, he does, buddy. And that's why we have to be kind to him. Sometimes, all a person needs is someone willing to see them." Luke nodded solemnly. "Like Mr. Theodore? Saw you?" Sam smiled, voice barely above a whisper. "That's right, son. Just like Mr. Theodore saw me." He stood, poured the coffee, and brought it to the table. "Here's your coffee, sir. I'll have your breakfast right out." As Sam turned back toward the kitchen, sunlight streamed through the window, glinting off the bronze plaque. He paused, quietly speaking into the morning air, a message of gratitude carried on the light. "Thank you, Theodore. You didn't just save me. You taught me what legacy truly means. It's not what we leave to people, but what we leave in them." Sam's story reminds us that the greatest investments in life are not in stocks or bonds, but in people. A small act of kindness, a moment of dignity given to someone who feels invisible, can ripple further than we imagine. Theodore Lancaster once had everything: wealth, power, fame. But he left this world yearning for something money could never buy: genuine connection. And he found it in a humble cafe, through the hands of a man who chose kindness over bitterness. Sam didn't just inherit a fortune. He inherited a responsibility to prove that true wealth isn't about what we have, but how we use it. His story asks us a question: who are the silent Theodores in your life? And do you have the grace to recognize them? If this story of unexpected kindness and the power of empathy touched you, take a moment to share it, so others can hear it too. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt true stories each week. Because sometimes, one small act of kindness can change an entire life. Not only for the one who receives it, but for the one who gives it.